City Council workshop for September 24th, 2018. Kristen?
Mayor Williams?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Marriott?
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Here.
Councilmember Ford?
Here.
Councilmember Jones?
Here.
Councilmember McGough?
Here.
Councilmember Miller?
Here.
Deputy City Manager Lori Gillis, do you want to get us started?
I do. Mayor, members of council, tonight is the first of two informational nights related to the proposed 2019-2020 biennial operating budget. Basically, you're going to hear from 8 departments. As you know, we continue to evaluate our reporting model and such that we follow your strategic priorities. Your 5 strategic priorities include growth and economic development, infrastructure, vibrant community and neighborhoods, organizational and service effectiveness, and safe community. Tonight we'll be hearing from growth and economic development and organizational and service effectiveness. We'll be back on the 8th with the other priority areas. The reason for this shift is to better align our resources with your priority areas and become more transparent in that alignment for our citizens. As we discuss this tonight, you will see that council priority areas has become synonymous with work system. So reference to a work system is a system that aligns with your priority areas. The first work system that we have established, which you're familiar with, is growth and economic development. So it's good that that's going tonight so you can hear how that aligns resources with priorities. However, because we are still in process, the presentations you're hearing tonight are by department, not specifically each work system, but we will highlight what work system each department will fall within. Thanks to the great work of finance, you will see consistency in every presentation that will outline areas of focus, issue statements, budgets, FTEs, and requests for the budget process. And with that, thank you to Jessica for driving, and first up is Kelly Hartman with the City Manager's Office.
Good evening, Ms. Hartman.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. How are you this evening?
Excellent.
Good. Tomas thought I was taller than I am. All right, on our first slide, we show some measures at the top that have to do with things that we're measuring in the citizen survey, our internal surveys with staff, and through neighborhood engagement. And I want to point out a difference that you'll see on the right-hand side in the lower part of the slide doing with employee count. And you'll see that our number has decreased by 2. And that has to do with the model that we changed from 2 deputy city managers to 1. And also moving Rick Osmus from the city manager's office to the IT department. And that really is to help support city council's focus on broadband and smart cities. While the CMO has 11 focus statements, you'll see 3 highlighted on this slide. And we chose these 3 to highlight the budget requests in the following slides. These issue statements support neighborhood engagement, customer focus, and service excellence. Our budget requests focus on the programs listed on this slide, which have to do with Resilient Arvada, process improvement, the ninjas, I think you may have heard that term before, our neighborhood engagement, and then content information management, which is a vital piece of our city clerk's office. So we need to make sure that we are following up our requests with data. And you will see the following performance measures that will support our requests. And they have to do with increasing Arvada's sense of community, realizing 1 million in hard savings through process improvement events, and increasing enrollment in Neighbors Connected. So this slide shows a summary of all of our budget requests for the city manager's office. The first 3 are really requests to establish a dedicated budget for the programs that are listed. And the last request is ensure licensing and maintenance is up to date for the city clerk's software. So you'll see that the total budget request for the city manager's office is $105,000. And our finance department asked every department to look at future opportunities and challenges as a part of this year's budget cycle. And so the city manager's office has listed the following. And since mobility is already a city council strategic result, we know that that's something that we need to focus on. And we know that there will probably be more emphasis placed on smart cities and housing as we move forward into the future. And the city's desire to redistribute resources in the work system model that Lori already talked about, and the need for an animal shelter assessment are also topics that we need to keep on our radar. So with that, that is the budget presentation and request for City Manager's office. Are there any questions that you have?
Mr. Fiver.
So on the future opportunities and challenges, are we just highlighting them for now? We're not really doing anything with them? Like
Yes, that's correct.
mobility and smart cities?
Mobility is currently a City Council strategic result, and we are looking at creating a mobility index by the end of this year. So that is currently in your strategic plan.
So what's the future opportunities and challenge around that then, if it's already in our plan?
It has to do with, once we create that index, and then we want to actually move forward with implementing that plan and that index, we may need an additional FTE to carry out those functions.
Okay. And then around smart cities, is that something we'll discuss at the retreat?
Yes.
And if we do, is it, my fear is there's so much movement in this area right now that if we're not focusing on it sooner than later, then we're going to miss the boat on being an innovative community.
Absolutely agree, and there is a lot of work going on in the background with staff, and we are attending meetings and working with others. This is now bringing it more up to the forefront. So I don't want to imply here that there isn't anything being done. We do have a team of staff that is already active. We need to have a plan as far as where we invest our dollars.
Because I think if I remember correct, Mayor, didn't we join the Smart City Alliance?
We did,
Okay. Okay, and we're active in that, right?
yes.
Okay. Well, I would like to highlight that we probably, I don't want it to, I'd like to elevate that not just to future opportunities and challenges, but it needs to be something that, there's so much happening in the space in the Denver area. I mean, Dr. Cogg's talking about starting a whole new division in there around this topic alone. And I just feel like if we just put it on paper and that's all we, if we're not putting some framework around it, we might miss it. So that's all.
I think we're giving much more than lip service to it. I know we had some employees that went to the Smart Cities Conference last week that was
Yes.
here in
They
Denver.
did?
And
Good.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Can you go back one page, I think? So you said that the top 3 budget requests were so that you can have a budget associated with each one of those programs. Can you just give me an example for Resilient Arvada? What is something that you'd spend some of that money on for that particular program?
And I'll turn that over to Jessica to answer that question.
So this would be things for like training exercises, both internally with staff and our partner agencies like fire, as well as out in the community. So we have really transitioned to doing more community engagement around this. So it may just be, supplies, training materials.
It's funding activities
Yeah.
of sort.
Yeah, planning activities in the community.
Okay, and that's helpful. Because you didn't say a person or, quarter, half, three-quarter FTE, and so I thought I better just ask to make sure. So this really is just to fund those activities that your department's working on to create education around whatever it might be.
Correct.
Okay, and that's probably the same with the other two, so I appreciate that.
That is correct, yes.
And to be clear, this is budget amounts being requested over prior year's budget. Right?
That is correct.
Right. Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next. Thank you. Mr. Daly.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I have just one request tonight to make to the council. We'll pull up my presentation very briefly.
This won't count against your time.
Okay. Yeah, just keep going. There, so you can see what the budget has been and what the proposed budget is. The number of employees has not changed. You can keep moving forward. No focus issue statements, no programs, except for prosecution that I want to talk about tonight. No key performance measures affected. And so basically what the city attorney's office has tonight for the council is a contingent request. And the request is really contingent upon what council decides it wants to do with the request made by the presiding municipal judge about an associate judge position. I can assure the council that I've had a number of in-depth discussions with Mr. Devon and with Judge Cook on this particular issue, and I'm convinced that should the council find that it's appropriate and necessary to have an associate judge, what the city attorney's office is requesting is that you allow me to have a second prosecutor. And basically, here's what the reason is. Right now, I have a full-time prosecutor, but I also have a temporary prosecutor that works between 8 to 12 hours a week, just to try to deal with some of the paperwork and try to give some assistance. With the possibility of an associate municipal judge position, I'm going to need another prosecutor. If there's 2 courts going on simultaneously, I'll need another prosecutor to be in front of the second court. I can tell you that code enforcement has certainly picked up since it's gone back to the police department, and there's been a lot more activity there. About 40% of the cases are attorneys appear in municipal court, and when they appear, there's more motions and that sort of thing. And obviously, if there's any vacation that the prosecutor needs to take, I need to pull another assistant city attorney. In this case, the assistant city attorney, Aaron Jacks, is going to be assigned to the police department, and so you can imagine that if I have to use Aaron to do the backup prosecution, he's not going to be able to be answering questions for the police department. So it puts me in a little bit of a quandary, but I want to make it clear that I'm fully in support of Judge Cook's request for the associate judge, and I'm just making that contingent request. Any questions?
Mr. McGough, you're first.
Yes, thank you. To your statement about the defendants are represented by defense counsel in about 40% of the cases, how much of an increase is that either over the past year or the last few years?
You know, my sense is that it is somewhat of an increase. It used to be that I would say maybe years before David took over as the presiding municipal judge, I would guess maybe 20% of the cases. But, you know, there's been an awful lot of change down at the legislature in terms of the complexity of representing and making sure that defendants are appropriately represented, especially with court-appointed counsel and that sort of thing. And I think that this is the major cause for additional attorneys in the municipal court.
So are, say in the code enforcement cases, are people asking, are they showing up in court with representation too for?
They are from time to time, but I just
Okay,
think that there's been more enforcement since it moved back to the police department. I think there's been more effective
So it's not the code enforcement.
in code enforcement, and so that has caused more work in the municipal court.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ford?
So, Mr. Daly, if a second prosecutor was hired, would then the temporary prosecutor go away? That position?
The answer would be yes. Yes, we wouldn't need that temporary prosecutor if we had a backup full-time prosecutor.
And then the other assistant city attorney who in the document is noted as tasked with other civil assignments, they would continue with those other civil assignments, and that would provide enough work for them.
Yes, that would be Mr. Jacks, who I've indicated is moving to the police department to be the police legal advisor.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you. And if you want to have this question answered at the court presentation, that's fine too. But it would seem like to me, other than the simultaneous nature of prosecuting cases with 2 judges, that really the amount of prosecutor time or prosecutors you need is based on number of cases that actually need to be prosecuted. Do you know, is that what the trend to cases that need to be prosecuted are? Is that going up every year or staying about the same, or how?
I can't, Mayor Pro Tem, I cannot tell you tonight offhand what the number of cases are, but I can tell you when the council approved the chief probation officer, I've had extensive discussions with Judge Cook about what a potential new probation program looks like. and it's going to look very different than what I think we would consider to be a traditional probation department, with the emphasis being on trying to deal with especially juvenile cases prior to them actually getting into court. And so there's going to be quite a few more, I think, requests for deferred prosecutions where you're going to have the cases still coming to the city attorney's office, even if they're not going to a full trial, but there will still be a burden on the city attorney's office, and that's another reason that we need a prosecutor, second prosecutor.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. So is there any truth to the rumor that it's because he's known as a hanging judge that more attorneys are showing
Quite
up?
the opposite.
Oh.
I can attest, based on what my staff has told me, that he is eminently fair.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Eminently.
Your Honor.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Andy Jones. Andy is our Deputy Court Administrator. She is covering for Val Marino, who is on vacation at an undisclosed location.
A well-deserved vacation.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to just add a little bit of clarification, if I may, to what Mr. Daly has just said. As far as a lot of defendants coming represented, we're really talking about the criminal docket. So out of 12 or 14,000 cases, we're talking percentage of more like a couple thousand cases. So it's not as if we're seeing, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 attorney appearances. Another thing that I have experienced is happening with the city attorney's office is they have embarked on more extensive motion practice. It's much more likely that we're going to see motions to revoke deferred judgments, motion to impose suspended sentences. So really where there's a lot of follow-up, and this is in part based upon sentences that come in where the city attorney has either reached a stipulation or a disposition, or they've made a recommendation that we suspend part of the sentence. So when you put that out there as a trailing item, the city attorney comes along usually about 12 months later and will decide whether they're going to file motions to revoke or to impose. So that's taking extra work. It's a written product, and it does take quite a lot of extra time. So we're seeing more of them. As far as numbers of represented defendants, we are appointing court-appointed counsel for indigent defendants a lot. I think that the complexion of our defendants has changed a bit as far as economics. We get a large number of indigent defendants, I think more than what I saw 5 years ago. Our customer base has, I think, changed some, and not for the better. And an awful lot of these people are eligible for court appointed. There are other times where I make a determination, or one of my colleagues will, that it's appropriate in the interest of justice to get a person help, particularly if we have a defendant who's charged with a jailable offense who's just not navigating the system well. There are those times when I think it's in the city's interest to say, we're going to appoint somebody just to get you through this thing, because you're clearly not comprehending this. So there are, I'd say, at least a handful of cases where we do that, just to support the broader interests of the community, I would say. Mr. Daly gave you a preview. Probation is not going to look like what I thought it was going to look like. And Mayor, I had a chance to speak with you. I've talked to Mr. Daly. I believe I had a fundamental misunderstanding of what probation can and should do. And Megan Lindner, who's come in, has just opened my eyes up to the fact that probation in dealing with juveniles needs to be a citywide approach. It's not going to be just court. So I had a long meeting with Chris Daly today to talk about how do we get some of the best practices, some of the evidentiary-based findings, not only to apply to court, but to get those into the thinking of city attorney's office, and we're going to meet with police department to see how do we get it there, how do we coordinate this even out to the schools. Clearly a separate political entity, but I think that the thinking that is being brought to bear will be beneficial to the whole community. And the goal really is, how do we facilitate these juveniles who are getting in some trouble as early as possible to keep them out of the system. So it's been just mind-boggling what I've learned over the last month or so. And I will be sharing this with council, but I think we are in position to do some great work by collaborating with the various stakeholder groups. Am I supposed to be pressing a thing?
I think Jessica will do it.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess keep pressing. Really? Yeah, keep going. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. What we had put in here is one of our goals is to screen 100% of juvenile defendants who are appropriate for screening. That's kind of circular. I think, in fact, we of course will do that. That'll be part of whether it's pre-sentence investigation or whether it's just general screening for probation. But again, I think the big value of having a probation person on site is going to be to push what I would call the best practices thinking farther down into the criminal justice so that these kids don't end up in court if they're not appropriate for court. I think that's going to be a long ball to hit. But as we work with the city attorney's office, as they in turn work with their clients, the police department, my goal is to keep kids out of the system for whom contact with the system itself is a detriment. And then that's where, and Mayor, I mean, you see this, that's where the thinking is going. So we want to get out ahead of this. And by the way, Megan has gone around and visited a lot of the local probation departments, so Westy, Lakewood, Denver. And I think by the fact that we're starting fresh, we're going to be in a position to do it extremely well. We're not having to change an existing system to fit new thinking and new knowledge. We're going to be able to come at this fresh and do the right thing up front, which I think is going to be a great efficiency for all of us. Our programs that really haven't changed is judicial support, it's administrative, and it's security. So those are three buckets that we look at to think about things. Just talked about that one. So these would be ads. Court-appointed counsel is up. I expect to continue to go up. One of the things where we're spending money now 3 days a week is we have attorneys in the jail Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where we have defendants appearing on first appearance in custody jailable offense. We are trying to save money in that we will call the attorneys as soon as we get the list from the sheriff's department. What we have been finding is due to some personnel challenges at the sheriff's department, we are getting bad information almost every day. So we're going with having attorneys Monday, Wednesday, Friday generally, and nearly every time they've got clients. We're in some discussion with ACLU about what their job is. My interpretation of the statutes is their job is to argue bond. ACLU says, no, it's not. They're full service attorneys. I don't buy it. That's not how the statute was written. So we let them argue bond. If the defendant wants to strive for a disposition, we give them a disclosure that says you are technically unrepresented for that matter. So this is a feud that will get carried into the legislative session. Some of the things, court smart audio visual. One of the challenges is when we have two courtrooms, you're sitting in courtroom 2. I know you like to call it council chambers, but we have to keep a record of the transactions here. One of the challenges of being a separate branch of government is we have to have control of our records. We have to follow our record retentions. It's looking like to use CourtSmart, which is currently used by city clerk. It's about $40,000. We've got a couple ideas that we may be able to save substantially on that. We're looking at a couple other vendors, but right now that's what it looks like to get in there easily and quickly. I'm just not sure that that's going to best serve all of our respective needs. Oracle database license, this has just been increased, or I think maybe it's a little bit of push down accounting. This is just how we're going to have to pay in order to store our data. It's not technically a new service, but it's a new charge. Remodel is on probation is we're going to knock a hole in the wall. People who come into probation, it's where Judge Boyle's chambers used to be. They're going to come through security first, and then either walk through or be escorted through court to a locked door, which will be the probation office. It will be unlocked by Ms. Lindner when she's got an appointment. Security is top for us, and generally the remodel is a couple desks and some chairs, but it's a door. And so we talked with Kim Baker. He's on it. And that's kind of most of it. We're still trying to get a backdrop in the courtroom per Mayor Williams' request. It'll happen at some point to make it look more like court. Any questions about any of this part?
No, you're up to your 8 minutes.
Yeah, I figured it was long past. Do you want to ask Andy anything? Because you came all the way here. I mean,
No.
no, okay.
I might talk a little bit less.
You know, this kind of
We'll look
says
at
what-
that for next year. Yeah, I like her a
I
lot.
like her a lot, so you're on for next year, Andy. Okay, so you see that. I don't think I got to read it to you. Anything else? Do you have any questions?
Ms. Ford, you're first.
I think we asked you this question once before, but if a new associate judge were to be hired, what would that equal in terms of the relief judges currently? Would any of them then go away, or?
Absolutely. but I can't say it will go away completely, because even if we have an associate judge, I still intend to take some vacation time, and he or she would as well. We would still have a need, but it would be substantially less. It just won't be gone altogether.
Okay, Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Judge, quick question. With your newfound scope of probation, are you staffed accurately now? Or do you feel like, wow, this is a much bigger job than I anticipated and now I need 14 people?
It's both, but those 14 people aren't going to be our people. It's going to be working with the city attorney. I don't think it's about headcount. I think it's going to be about policy and major shifts in policy. I don't even think it's going to require huge changes in process and procedures. I think it really is going to be collaborating with the city attorney to understand that diversion is the secret for probably 50% of these kids. It's having them work with their clients, the police department, to say, let's talk about diversion. It's putting effective policies and I would say mindsets in place through the school. And they're wrestling with this about when does a kid become a defendant. But I think it is not yet is probably going to be the answer for more of these kids. It's getting them so they're not coming into the criminal justice system. So I think there will be an awful lot of people involved, but I don't think it's going to require an increase in headcount for really any of our departments currently. I think really it's change of thinking.
Thank you.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
So I just want to make sure I'm clear with this format we're doing. In the future opportunities and challenges, is the idea that that's going to be a future ask? Or is there an ask? Or
Not necessarily. What we are describing is what is on the radar. The asks are all included in this presentation. What we put them out there for is our council strategic retreat discussions and letting you know that we'll keep you informed of those areas.
okay, so there's just more of a heads up?
At
You're
this
not
point, a
looking for-
heads up. If it was clearly defined and a clear need, it would be in the asks. Or if it was in the ask and wasn't put out as a request, we're still vetting it.
So let me ask you just logistically. So if we approve the, it's for next year. So this would be 19 to 20. That's right. I always forget. I always think our fiscal year is like right around the corner, but you're a year plus out, right? Make sure.
This would be for next year. So
This would
when
be
the
for
budget
next
is
year.
19 to
adopted, it's for
20.
19 and 20.
So fiscal year 19, so January 1?
Yes.
Okay. But it is, okay. So it's not that there's mission critical, but I mean, if we discuss it in our retreat in January, we say, okay, fine, do the associate judge and so forth. We've already set our budget in October.
That is correct.
So really, before you can work on smart cities or associate judge or associate district attorney or whatever, it won't be until 21.
No.
Because we
20?
amend the budget.
Right. And
Oh, we would amend the budget and then go back. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Ms.
Thank
Ford?
you.
Judge, I had a crazy idea as I was reading this financial report because in it, it talks about our parks having issues with hiring seasonal workers. Is there any way that we could get seasonal workers through the court system through the probation where, you know, kids could work for the city?
I think probably not. I'm going to tell you a couple reasons. One, if the kids are on probation, to the extent that is a program that we find effective, great. But when I inquired of the city attorney a couple years ago, there's also an employment law aspect to this. We have to be careful about using probationers to do work that is otherwise done by salaried employees. I don't know the ins and out of it, but there's actually some issues. I think to the extent probation establishes a volunteer program to supervise community service, that may be a possibility. But I think there are actually several embedded legal issues that would present challenges.
Very good. I'll be deducting 5 minutes from your next presentation. I do want to indicate I did talk to Dave Thomas, who's one of the court-appointed attorneys, who spoke very favorably towards the concept of an associate judge. So.
Oh, thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Haley, I know that you were more than happy to give Mr. Judge Cook part of your time.
Okay, so I have 2.5 minutes?
Whatever you need.
That's good.
Yeah. I like you better.
She's prettier.
Well, that's not the, yes, she is, but that's not the reason. I do not want any accusations.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Good evening, Ms. Haley.
Let's talk
And this
budget
is the HR person.
for human
Yeah.
resources. I just want to call out Gabriella Bomber, who's with me here tonight, too. She and I have worked diligently on our budget presentation for you. Very quickly, our overview of our focus areas includes workforce and strategic partnerships, compensation, benefits, and wellness and employment. Those are our pillars of what we're all about. You see our strategic results in front of you, as well as our current budget and our employee count. We are asking for an additional employee, a new position in this budget cycle, which I'll highlight shortly. The issue statements we wanted to highlight that are in alignment with our budget requests include the two that you see up there. For a very long time, we've had what we feel is a lack of an adequate staffing level in human resources to truly do the work that we want to do on behalf of the organization. The other issue statement that is highlighted is our lack of intentional brand as we incorporate the city's vision, mission, and values into our recruitment and onboarding processes. The timing is really crucial right now with an incredibly competitive and increasingly competitive job market out there that we focus on these two areas. The programs that are related to our budget requests for this cycle include, of course, recruitment, as we just talked about. We want to ensure that we're doing recruitment in a timely and effective manner, and then onboarding as a new program area for us to really put some intentional framework around how we're getting those new employees into our organization and immediately ingrained into our mission, vision, values, and our culture. The key performance measures that we wanted to highlight are what you see in front of you as well. These measures all speak directly to our ability, again, to market the city's jobs and attract a very large pool of diverse and qualified candidates so that our hiring managers can find the best candidates for the jobs as well as get them on board in an effective manner. So the summary of all of our budget requests include the following. As we said, we do feel it's necessary to increase our department by one and hire an administrative assistant. We are contributing $20,000 in the reduction of our temporary wages to help pay for that full-time, fully benefited position. We do feel we need some additional funding in our background checks, and that's all part of the recruitment process to create more efficiencies and a more robust background check process, as well as an established and deliberate onboarding program where we can immerse the employee more immediately into the organization than we are right now. So that's the total of our requests of $63,838. And then finally, as we're looking at our heads up to you all and our future opportunities and challenges, we see technology as both an opportunity and a challenge for us. We're currently working with some good systems that we have in place, but we need the ability to integrate those technology systems so that they can literally speak to each other, which will create some efficiencies for the work that we're doing on behalf of our employees. Oracle is a great tool as well. We feel the need that in the future, the ability to enhance the Oracle platform that we have, such as creating more employee self-service opportunities, benefits enrollment tool that's more robust and online for our employees. All of those things we feel are necessary in the future, as well as our final bullet point, a learning management system that can help support all of our organizational development programming in the years to come. Questions?
Very good, Mr. McGough. Judge, did you see how she did that? Concise, efficient. And maybe that's the distinction you should look at.
Good evening, Ms. Haley.
Good evening, Mr. McGough.
I'm wondering, you made reference to greater success in the first recruitment process.
Yes.
So basically what we're talking about is making sure that we do get somebody hired during the first recruitment process so that we don't have to go back out and re-advertise.
Exactly.
And what's our success now, and what's the goal in that?
The target for that performance measure is that we want 90% of our recruitment processes to be of success the first go around. That's what we're targeting. We've been fairly consistent in trying to meet that measure, but we are struggling just more so in this year as we're seeing the boom in the job market for people trying to find those qualified, quality candidates in a timely manner has become more and more a challenge for us.
So how long is a typical recruitment process, so that if it's not successful the first time and have to go to a second or perhaps third, how much time are we talking about that that it costs the organization?
So a typical recruitment process we could get done within about 45 days to 60 days. That is what we strive for, is to try to get a conditional, that's what the second measure speaks to, is to get a conditional job offer out to a candidate within 45 days of posting that position. Not necessarily have them on board and working for us, but at least get the offer out to them and then start the background check. So that's the typical amount of time. If we have to go back out 2 or 3 times, then that means 3, 4, 5 months before we can get someone on board.
Okay, that helps me to understand the importance of that particular objective.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Jones?
I just want to make a comment. It's not just in the public sector is it hard to find employees. It's everywhere because there's not a great pool, a big pool to pull from.
That's right.
So I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Haley.
Thank you.
All right, you're halfway.
Very good.
So I wanted to give you guys a little context for the basis of our request based on how long I've been here. So I started here in 1995, and we had 8 servers, about 120 computers. We had about 40 gigabytes of total disk space that was in use. We weren't connected to the internet, and I think we had 12 employees in our department. So today we have about 170 servers that we're managing to run the business systems. We have over 1.2 million gigabytes of disk space, which is a little over a petabyte. We have over 3,500 devices that the city's using to run operations. And we're connected to the internet, and we have stuff stored everywhere outside of here as well. So that's kind of the basis of our request, and it's about providing support and keeping up with technology and the security aspects. And on the employee side over here, you see we're going from 27 to 29. So one of those is Rick Osmus moving over into our department, and the other one is an ask for another employee. So with that, our focus issue statements are tied to security and being responsive to the employees here who are serving the citizens with requests for the technology that they use. And the programs around those are related to cybersecurity and our technology service management program. And for the measures under these 2 programs, we have a goal of trying to have 100% cybersecurity effectiveness, and that's based on the measures that are part of the CJIS, which is the Criminal Justice Information Systems, the payment card industry, and some NIST standards. So we have a whole list of those that we're trying to either comply with or be compatible with and still be able to run operations. And then the project and service management area is related to just meeting the needs of the customers here, which are the employees that we're supporting. So as part of our request, the first one is the technical service analyst, which would be on the service management side that would help take in the requests from the employees that need assistance. Citrix software, that's just a licensing change, and that's software that's used by the police department and another of employees to remotely access into applications and data that we have here at the city. And the remaining requests on here are all related to security. So it's outside parties doing testing of our systems, a logging tool to log events that are happening on our systems to be able to be a little proactive in issues that might be coming up, training for all the city employees. You guys have probably gone through some of that yourselves. And the cloud access is tools to monitor and manage the data that's being stored, like in Google, Amazon, and other places that's not here locally. And the mobile iron is software to help manage the mobile devices, the phones, tablets that are getting used in the field and the data that's on them, or if they get lost, we can disable them or wipe them. And then for future opportunities, so some of these will be familiar, continuing to support the field and remote workers. software as a service or hardware as a service. So that's just more expansion of information out into, you know, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. And blockchain and smart community technologies kind of both go together because those could be technologies that could help manage the Internet of Things which are tied to the smart technology. And that is the end. Any questions?
Come on, Mr. Pfeiffer, there you go.
So, well, a couple things. One is living through a ransomware at the state. I think hopefully we're making some focus around that because that took 2 months of productivity away from a 3,300 person organization.
Yeah, so we definitely have things in place already with strong backups to be able to restore from and tools to start monitoring for that either at the firewall level or the desktop
So
level
we have
to
the
be
firewalls
proactive.
and any dark trace or anything else to monitor what's going on. Okay, because I mean, even though we're a public entity and stuff is available, it's disruptive to take us down.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm glad we're focusing on that. The other thing is I didn't hear anything about, there's convergence between IT and telecom and transportation. Where do we see that fitting in your programs? Because you have broadband in your program now, right?
Right.
We'll say fiber broadband with Rick.
So, well, I guess as part of the broadband plan and where we're at today is getting traffic signals all connected together so we can manage those or put other maybe Internet of Things devices on there for smart transportation technology. We're communicating or working with Jessica maybe for the parking garage to get parking management in place downtown to help with that as a smart community or smart city technology.
So would those fall under your budget or would they fall into, where would
I think
they?
some of those might fall under public works, under traffic. What did you say?
Absolutely. Some of it is under traffic and being considered there. We're not talking that specifically in the budget presentation, but we can highlight that. We have pieces spread throughout different budgets right now because they're coming in from different areas. Looking at the small cell piece and all the connectivity, the traffic signals. There's several pieces coming into play here, so we are not sitting idle. It's just not presented in an all-inclusive plan at this time.
Now does our IT department participate in all those to
Absolutely.
harmonize that back in? So
Absolutely.
we're doing smart parking, we're looking at, you know, Dot and I have talked about how do we communicate to the public through kiosks or other means. I mean, that should all start coming together.
Yeah, we're definitely heavily involved in the parking
Community
garage
engagement.
with the monitoring of cars going in and out to read the license plates, to count cars and see what's going in and out of there. So that was a definitely collaborative effort with the city manager's office and IT and other departments.
I just know it gets difficult when you have multiple departments trying to do one widget, you know? Because I think like smart parking is a great idea. I mean, if you can show how many parking spots are on which level, hopefully it'll be filled one day, but it'd be nice to know that there's 4 more up, there's 3 down, or whatever the case is, and that's just helping us engage our community. And to bring it all the way back around, what Don and I've been talking about is how do we get more engagement with our community? And I think you take all that smart things in the city and put it in somebody's hands and let them know about their community. Not how did they get there, what bus is going to take, where's the events, is there parking at the parking garage? You know, all that should come together to feel like they're part of the community using technology. All right. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Archer, have you recovered from Illinois State?
No. I'm not certain that the group that goes with me is going to any more games, so it might be lonely up in Fort Collins. So I am the last team member of the Organizational and Service Effectiveness. As you can see, these are the measures that the Finance Department tracks, our high-level measures. Many of these should look quite familiar to you, including our 10-year financial plan, our AAA bond rating, and our submission for the GFOA awards each year. Our budget does look quite large, and I would like to clarify that. Over $33 million of that budget is related to transfers that support other areas of the city, including our street maintenance transfer, our capital fund transfer, parks, Arvada Center, and economic development. So if you remove that, the finance budget is more in the tune of around $6 million per year. You will notice that we are reducing our position by a 0.7. We are not cutting somebody in thirds. Basically what we have done as part of a process improvement, we were able to eliminate one position in our revenue program. You remember that we came to City Council a little over a year ago and asked to go to 100% online filing. And that efficiency enabled us, when we had a retirement this year, to not fill that position, move some duties around. And so actually we are going down one position and then proposing to add a 0.3 to another. We actually have 6 issue statements. We're only looking at 2 tonight, and these relate to the underutilization of the Finance Department expertise and then collaboration with the Finance Department. And we hope to continue to reduce the underutilization and increase our collaboration. 3 programs that we have budget requests for, a combination around the purchasing and risk management, and then our financial analysis and reporting. Our key measures, 90% of supply requests are fulfilled at the time of the request. This is in our purchasing group. 1 in 10 ratio of workers' comp claims. So we're trying to keep that ratio under 1 in every 10. And we've been successful so far, so we hope to keep that going. And then 90% of our audit recommendations are implemented within 1 year. And actually, we may change this measure. We've been lucky enough to been able to implement all audit recommendations each and every year. So we have 3 requests. The first would be to increase our stores keeper position from a 0.7 to a 1. This would be a change in a full-time position, but we would offset that in temporary wages in both our risk department and our purchasing area. This is a request that we may not need to do this. So what we're asking of City Council is to give us the ability. Currently that position is at a 0.7, and we're taking a look and seeing if by increasing it to a 1 we would gain some efficiencies. If we do not, we will not change that position. We are asking for an increase on our external audit of $20,000. Every 5 years we have to go back out and select an auditor. We're in the process right now of going through those RFPs. We'll be including our audit committee here in a couple weeks to help us with that final selection. We do usually see an increase, and so we're asking for $20,000 to help us on that possible increase. And then the final number, $550,000, is somewhat misleading. What we're asking to do is eliminate the vendor fee. We've talked a little bit about what we would do with that vendor fee. So this would also be a revenue coming in.
Isn't that just a wash?
It is a wash. It's absolutely a wash. But we do need to ask permission to spend those dollars. And so what you'll see is because that would live in the finance budget, we're asking for the increase that's equivalent to what would be the elimination on the revenue side. A good question would be, what happens if the bond issue fails? Would we continue with this? And we are proposing to eliminate the vendor fee. If the bond issue fails, we would then propose to take that money and spend it on street maintenance. And so, because this is an ordinance, City Council will see first and second reading of this in October, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that at that point in time.
So it should not be a parentheses?
It should also have a revenue source coming in, but we just didn't show it on this. So it should show 550 and then 550 as a revenue as well. So future opportunities, City Council is well aware of the Supreme Court case around Wayfair, and we're still figuring out how all that's going to shake out. Lots of changes at the state level. You may or may not have seen that the state of Colorado issued a demand to everybody that collects internet, that everybody that sells on the internet now needs to collect and remit, and that needs to happen by the end of November. A lot of changes going on, and so we're kind of waiting to see how that's going to play out. Second, we have two urban renewal areas that end in 2028 and one that ends in 2034. So the ones in 2028 are Ralston Fields, JCMD, and in 2034, the Northwest Arvada area. So will be lots more conversation around that. That is currently the end of our 10-year planning cycle, 2028. And so as we talk to you in January, we'll be looking at ways to program the possible future revenues. And then finally, changes related to statewide sales tax simplification. And this is all around one remittance, one place to get your business license, and et cetera. Some of those proposals. And they're still a little ways off, but the state is probably going to issue an RFP around this, so more to come. Any questions about finance?
Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Archer. I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
We were talking about transferring funds from one fund to the other in your presentation, so I think maybe this might be the wrong timing, but I don't think we're having a presentation from that department, so you get my fun questions.
Okay.
So still have a little heartburn about the golf fund being a negative number and approving a budget with a negative number.
Absolutely.
And is it possible to transfer money out of the general fund into the golf fund to make that a balanced budget fund so that we can approve a balanced budget fund?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's a possibility. Certainly that would reduce the fund balance in the general fund, but it would give us the ability to make the golf fund a balanced budget. And certainly we could then look at ways to having the golf fund transfer money back to the general fund throughout their 10-year period of time.
Sure. And that, it looks like you probably need to do about 3.3 million in order to make that balance over the
if I remember
course of it?
properly, I think that's the lowest period in the 10-year model for the golf fund is about 3.3 million. So yes, to make it go to zero, that's what would need to happen. The golf fund is balanced in the 10-year plan, but not in the individual years going up to that.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't balance until 10 years. Which,
Correct, until 2028.
Yeah.
Correct.
So 9 years of negative numbers just stresses me out. So another question I have, you spoke to being, underutilized expertise by the finance department. Could you explain that a little bit more?
So there's periods of time that finance being separate from the rest of the organization, we feel like we may miss out on opportunities. You have to remember that these issue statements were set 5 years ago. And so we've worked really hard with the rest of the organization to make sure that we're included in pretty much everything. And at this point, we feel very good that we are. And so it's more of a reminder than it is a concern at this point.
Great. I just have one last question.
Okay.
We spoke the other night about the Health and Human Services Fund. And, right now it sits at about 210,000, you said, Councilmember Pfeiffer? You said it was at 210,000 the other night?
What we contribute to
I
it
think
from?
that's the number.
Yeah,
That
I
sounds
think it
proper.
is.
And how long has it been 210,000?
At least since 2013.
Okay.
At least since 2000. I think 2012-ish, it was about 100 and, 140, 130, somewhere in that ballpark. And then we added up to get to about 210.
So as we have seen the growing need for services, and our nonprofits come to us because they're in need. The Action Center came the other day, and
Yep.
we do give to the Caring Clinic and Community Table, and there are so many that go unfunded because we just don't have the funds to be able to do this. Is it possible, and when you look at this budget, the 10-year plan, there's $3 million to play with. I know that you would have a heart attack if I said, could you put $3 million into this, because you like
Certainly.
a very conservative budget. Is it possible that we could increase that and have it increase every single year quite regularly as the need increases? I mean, our need is not going away.
Yeah, certainly. That's a really good question, and we have competing challenges with funds throughout. I would reflect that it hasn't changed since 2013, and so it's certainly something we could look at to try to increase those funds. I know Ed and his team are also looking at ways to put additional funding into that. I think that's an area that you couldn't put enough money.
Right.
I think if we had it, we could triple that and we could still have a need. And so, certainly looking at a way to increase it is something we can talk with Mr. Devin and try to see if there's a way to put additional funds there.
Thank you.
Mr. Marriott?
Just a quick question, Mr. Archer, in your presentation on your first slide, the picture, it says one of your goals is to continue to maintain a AA bond rating or better. Is that just a misprint? It should be a AAA?
Well, our concern is that there's not very many cities that have a AAA bond rating, and so when we had established this, our goal was a AA, and so we've just left it there. We do have AAA today.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the challenge with any kind of rating like this is as soon as you go out and issue bonds, all of a sudden you become more risky.
Right.
And so most likely if this bond issue passes this fall, we hope that we will get a AAA rating, but then it's likely that we could slip off of that and maybe end up with a AA plus or something to that extent. So we played with making it higher, but this made us feel like AA was a good number to shoot for.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Mr. Jones?
Just to follow up to Ms. Miller's question on the golf fund, wasn't that designed to essentially pay for itself over the 10 years? So while it's negative in this year and next year, we're using the revenue generated in each year to pay that fund balance over the 10 years.
That is correct.
Okay.
As part of the plan was to grow revenues, increase fees, grow the restaurant over that 10 period of time to pay back the fund balance.
So it's possible that if with increased fees and increased revenue through food services, that could be paid back before the 10 years.
Absolutely.
If we overshoot revenues, which would be a great thing.
Yeah.
So I understand your concern, but again, I think it was designed that way to borrow against it, and then have it pay itself back.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Hey, I want to jump on Dot's comments around the human services dollar, because we've had a lot of people coming to us asking. I just want to make a comment. One, I would encourage any discussion of increasing that, and I agree that there's never enough. But I will say, what little we put in there has probably the largest impact, in my opinion, other than streets. We need to kind of take care of that. But for what little money's put in that human services fund, I see how it spreads like fire in ours. I shouldn't say it that way. Like, it blooms.
Wildflowers.
How about that? It blooms nicely in our community, because for every dollar, it seems like we get $10 or $15 worth of services in return to these nonprofits. So I would encourage that we can maybe look into a small increase or something in there to kind of maintain, because Ms. Miller is right. Our need does not go away, but we also shouldn't be like our gas tax and be stuck in 1 year in a flat rate forever. So maybe if we can just look at some small increases, I'd encourage that.
Okay.
And then and don't put the $3 million into the golf. We could take a little of that and put it in the human services. But I'm okay with it not being 100% balanced, because at the end of the day, aren't we kind of thinking at the 10 years where we want to be balanced? It's not necessarily through the years, right?
Our goal is to be balanced in both. Ultimately, our goal is to be balanced in every year.
Right.
But your council policy says at the end of 10 years.
Yeah, and so, but we don't even know what the revenue projections could be. Next thing you know, we've had a hiccup with the Westwoods golf course because of the remodel. But how if revenues triple next year? Then we would re-level and kind of repoint our trajectory, and those revenues might change, right? So we don't want to necessarily backfill it necessarily right away, because we don't know what year over year. But if it was the immediate year, would we not ask to kind of close that?
Yes, if it was requirement that we had to make it balance in the current year, we would have to come to City Council and request to fill that.
Sort of like we've done every year with Arvada.
Well, that's what I was thinking. So we do not want to do that with the golf courses. So.
Okay.
No other questions?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Archer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks so much for having me. So this is a little bit of a transition, both literally and metaphorically, as it relates to a new work system. And so we were doing the organizational effectiveness, and those were all components of the organizational effectiveness work system, synonymous with your priority area. And now we're moving into the growth and economic development work system, in which AIDA, economic development, is a part of. We'll also hear from community development. And while we are in the process of combining those budgets, and will, as we move forward, have that presented as a work system budget, because of the nature and the pace of how quickly we're moving with this work system, the presentations are still done in the budget. So I'm going to present the AIDA portion of it, and then I'll have Rob come up and talk about community development. Eventually, and by eventually I mean, hopefully within the beginning of 2019, we'll have a new budget that's kind of combined that represents this work system with all the different components. Up here you see a slide that represents the various strategic results and other performance measures that we have within AIDA. It has our focus areas, and you can see within our budget and our number of employees that we tend to be relatively stable as it relates to our department and our asks. an issue statement, and one of the things that is of note here is this is an issue statement that is, of course, no surprise. There's a ever-changing world of the retail marketplace. Brian just talked about the Wayfair case, how those things impact the retail marketplace, and what we're trying to do is represent with this issue statement that we need to be focused in collaboration with community development and land use planning and our other aspects of how our land use and our commercial environment is changing because of that retail marketplace. And so this is a issue statement that helps highlight it, but I also think it helps highlight for the need of why that collaboration amongst the different work groups in growth and economic development is important. These are the programs that will continue. These are the programs that are part of AIDA now and will continue to be part of AIDA. We have no budget requests. And so that's good. However, there's a but. AIDA is really two organizations. One, it's the internal department that's part of the operating budget of City Council, and then there's the AIDA board that also from time to time comes with program asks in order to be able to do the good work that that board does. And I just want to give you the heads up that later in the springtime, when the kind of 2018 budget closes and we kind of understand where revenues and expenses are, there will likely be a presentation from the AIDA board that would ask to bring some funding to their programs. They did not receive any fundings, nor did they ask these past 2 years, as City Council really devoted a lot of its time and attention to street maintenance. And so that kind of put some of their programs a little bit on the backseat. They had enough reserve funding to be able to move forward, but I think it's time that they are likely going to come and make another ask.
So that might be for facade grants, or?
It could be for facade grants. You know, interesting question. One of the things that we want to do in collaboration with you all as you think of your next strategic plan, we want to think about what our next strategic plan looks like too, and we want to make sure that the programs that we put in place are things that are aligning to be able to move those strategic plans forward. And so where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? How do we influence? We've had a lot of good success with one of our programs called the AMI, Arvada Manufacturing Initiative, and what that does is it does a lot of training that does Six Sigma and those types of things in manufacturers. And we've seen with relatively little investment on our end, $5,000, $10,000, that they've been able to go in and have businesses reduce costs, equipment, move things around in the tunes of 7 figures, that they hire more employees just because of the organizational process improvement things that they're able to accomplish. So if we can target more things like that, that we get the most bang for our buck, and we also look at broader policies that don't just help individual businesses like the facade grant, but can help larger swaths. Those are things that we're interested in. The grant program is important, but we also want to impact larger policy across the city and helping.
Yep.
And then future growth and opportunities, future opportunities and challenges. You know, and this will be a common theme that you hear from Rob and then the other departments that are also integrated into the growth and economic development, is that this integration between the workload, the work programs within AIDA, and the growth and economic development work system is going to be really important, because that's where we're going to see those efficiencies, and that's where we think that this model is going to really help support us and be an opportunity going into the future. A couple other highlights that we wanted just to bring to the forefront tonight is just our change in what we were able to do with our business appreciation event. This was our first year of changing the format a little bit. It was, I think, a fairly large success, but we want to build upon that success. We had much higher attendance than we were able to have, and we were able to reduce cost by about 40%. And so those are always things that we're looking for, is how do we still able to relate to our business community, show our appreciation, be able to connect, do the things that we're trying to accomplish, but also do that as the most effective and efficient with the resources that are allocated. We were also able to take that money, and where we're using that money is that we've been doing some econometric forecasting modeling, and I've been involved in this to really understand not just where we want to go as a community through strategic results, but where where are we going based on the econometric forecasting and understanding whether or not that's where we want to go as a community, whether or not we're want 1,000 new jobs, but we're forecasted to hit 2,000. Okay, we should be more ambitious. Or we want 1,000 new jobs, but we're forecasted to get 500. Okay, what policy decisions do we need to make, and what AIDA programs could we necessarily recommend in order to be able to affect those changes of what the future looks like based on our current policies and our forecasting, and how do we change our destiny, if you will, should we not like where our destiny is headed based on that modeling. The last thing that I was going to bring up is that AIDA is one of the only accredited it's actually the only accredited economic development organizations in the state of Colorado. We're very proud of that. We've held that distinction for 6 years, and next year we will go through a re-accreditation process that will require a site visit. And so with all the changes and those types of things, we'll have a lot to talk about, but we're confident that we'll be able to maintain that accreditation. Next, I'll invite, well, let me ask questions first within AIDA, and then we
There are none.
Oh, okay, great. Next, we'll bring up Mr. Smetana, who will give us an overview of the community development budget as it relates to our work system within growth and economic development. Thanks.
Yeah, so as Ryan mentioned, I'm going to really be focused on the piece of community development that will be part of the growth and economic development group. So when you look at the budget and the FTEs here, this is the combination of both planning and housing. So there will be about 12 positions that will go into growth and economic development. The other positions will go to city manager's office in terms of housing. So this is a little, just gets the information out there, but it will be split into two. So in terms of the focus issues, there are actually 6 focus issue statements that community development has. But again, they relate to a number of different things. We still have issue statements that deal with neighborhood engagement, which went primarily to the police department, which was reflected in the number of employees, and then to city manager's office. The housing elements will go city manager's office. And then planning will go to growth and economic development. So in terms of that piece and the programs involved, that's development review planning, the day-to-day operations of reviewing development cases, building permits, those types of things. And then long-range planning in terms of maintaining and updating our comprehensive plan and doing some other planning efforts. And we have the administrative piece. But as part of those 3 pieces, right now, besides just the day-to-day operations and the high level of development review activity we have, as you also know, we are doing the land development code update. And that involves both development review and long-range planning. And that's an effort that will last another year or so. And beyond that, we next want to take a look at aligning all of our plans with the comprehensive plan. So that's an effort we hope to do within this budget period as well, or at least get started on. And then we'll also be looking at additional efforts for other areas of the community in terms of small area planning or corridor planning. Some of the performance measures that we have related to our work group have to do with a mix of housing and housing location, and making sure we have a variety of housing types throughout the community, as well as just our development review timeframes and making sure we complete our reviews in a timely manner. In terms of our budget request, we're just looking at 2, and those would be for Trackit and Bluebeam, which are the software we utilize to do a lot of our review processes. There are license fees and maintenance fees involved with those. So with the number of licenses we have, we are asking for a budget increase to cover just that maintenance and licensing. We're also looking at an increase in our training budget to train folks on the new software, to train new employees as we get them, and to help employees maintain their professional accreditation. So in terms of future opportunities and challenges, we, as Ryan mentioned, will be integrating the planning team within the Growth and Economic Development Department. There is going to be an increased focus on smaller infill projects and redevelopment, which sometimes can be more timely and more controversial. We also will be looking at our opportunities to increase our comprehensive planning efforts throughout the community. And coming up shortly, we're going to be next year looking at a 5-year review of our comprehensive plan. And there's the 2020 census activities just around the corner. That's my presentation.
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, wait, sorry. You guys got to get to your buttons faster. Mr. McGough, you're first.
Okay. Thank you. There was a statement that you made and had on the screen about the development review process and making that as efficient as possible. And I think the track-it system that you made reference to deals with that, and of course the land development code itself does. Is there a goal of how much that whole process may be speeded up, or in terms of total days or percentage of time reduced for approval of development requests?
Sure. We do have timeframes today that we're trying to work within, and we try to be on time 90% of the time. But as part of our integration into the Growth and Economic Development Group, we are going to reevaluate our timelines and timeframes to see if there are additional efficiencies.
Let's figure out how to cut them in half.
We'll certainly take a look at that. Yeah, but also, we have moved to all electronic reviews, which has helped us out immensely as well, and that's what the Bluebeam software is. So we do all our reviews electronically, passing information back and forth electronically to the applicant and staff, and that helps cut down on our time as well.
So still the question is, is that reduced to a numerical objective in terms of time, or reduction in the amount of current time required for the development review process?
Well, a few years ago when we came up with the development review process time frame, we went from kind of an open-ended time frame to set time frames for various types of applications. So they're either generally to get through an approval process for an administrative case, 18 weeks, to go to Planning Commission for a public hearing case is 22 weeks for a smaller case, up to 28 weeks for a larger case. And so as we integrate into this new department, we do want to go back and look at those timelines to see how and if we can compress those even further.
Well, I know we'll all be interested in that compression.
If I could step in here as well, as we are transitioning, also not just looking at reducing timeframes, but how the process flows, and so that's already coming into play as far as discussions that this team is having and changes that they're making related to push things through the process faster. Additionally, decisions made around the land development code will impact the timing required for development review. So we have a lot of things coming into play. Intention is for the number to go down, and they're already making adjustments in their process in their new group to bring that timeline down.
Thank you.
We will have a number. We're not there yet.
Okay. Ms. Ford?
So Rob, I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it, and whoever needs to answer, that'd be great. So I was a little concerned in reading the document on page 15 where it talks about the current development fees that are not really paying for the review process, where our general fund is more or less subsidizing those fees. As I'm reading that, what is the plan in terms of looking at those fees? And then also we've talked about possibly adding on some fees to the development fee for the Arts and Culture Commission plan set forth in their plan. What are we going to do about that?
Well, Ryan can jump in and probably give some more specifics.
It's a hot potato.
We are in the process of looking at the fees and evaluating the fees, and we've been meeting regularly over the past month or so, and we've dialed in on some increases in fees that we'll need to bring back to you If you wanted to add anything.
And we will be back in the next few months related to those recommended fee adjustments, but staff has dug in and done a detailed assessment about actual costs compared to fees being charged. So there will be something in front of council related to those fees. At this time, it is my understanding that arts piece has not been brought into this as far as that component of fee. What we're looking at right now is how much does it cost and how much should we be charging. So we will update those fee amounts, and we are low. And that's why we're looking at it, and we're trying to expedite that piece of the process.
And I assume we're looking at other communities to, I mean, not
Absolutely.
unlike we do with our water and wastewater
Absolutely,
and
you'll
sewer
see that
fees.
information.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, now we don't have any other questions. Great. Is that it?
That concludes our presentations for tonight.
Very good. Anything else you need from council tonight on this?
I don't believe so, but October 8th will be even more busy because we will also have the pay plan coming in on October 8th as well, so you'll get a lot of information. In the meantime, I would say if there was something that you would need added to our presentations related to the budgets, let us know and we can adjust.
Are we here on the 8th?
You are.
Oh.
I thought we had that off, but I guess.
No, the first.
First. Well, I thought we had 2. That's why I was excited a minute ago.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, I have a general question. I didn't ask it when Ms. Haley was up here, but wondering about, it's been a few years since we've formulated, and I don't think we've reviewed our compensation policy. Is that something that we will be looking at sometime soon? I mean, we've got requests in here, and we'll be having the salary increases come before us. Is it time for us to look at that policy again?
So, Mr. McGough, are you talking about the total compensation
The total
philosophy?
compensation philosophy statement.
Yeah, that is the process we work together with you as a council on. And yes, our intention is to come forward and talk to you about that. We can probably begin addressing it at the January retreat with you in 2019 to look at potentially updating the policy for effective date of 2020.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, will we be waiting until the retreat in January to talk about, I mean, when do we talk about for example, the passage of our streets issue or the passage of the state transportation issue? If there should be, on the other hand, if the fire district should not be successful in stabilizing its mill rate and the impacts that would have on us, when will we talk about those things?
We should have some placeholders on the calendar coming in. We do not, but that is a good issue to raise as far as we will talk about at the retreat, but ahead of that, we'll need to start having conversations pending on which way things go.
Some of those discussions will start the day after Election Day.
Exactly.
Okay.
As staff, we're having conversations, and we will make sure that we're prepared to address those
Okay.
issues.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Very good. Nothing else to come before us. We stand adjourned. Good work, everybody.
Okay. Good stuff.